Hey inventory planners, this is Basil and I'm going to talk a bit today about bundles and assemblies. I want to click on that catalog section over here on the left, and if you haven't taken a look at our catalog video yet, definitely suggest digging into that one as well. Now you'll see bundles and assemblies over here on the left hand side, and what's really nice about configuring bundles with components or assemblies with components is it's going to allow you to consider the past sales of those higher levels, whether it's the bundled goods or the assembled goods, to figure out how we should replenish our component stock. Now in the case of assemblies, we would order components and then we would separately assemble components into assemblies, and then we would essentially place that into stock and fulfill orders accordingly with that assembly stock. In the case of bundles, these are virtual bundles. Say I have 100 individual t-shirts, all right? That's the same exact thing as saying that we have 25 packs. It's all tied together. It's just a matter of how we sell it. So it's what we do in this case is essentially we're going to force the sales from those 5 packs down to the individuals. It's all just different ways of selling that component stock, and we're going to focus on forecasting and replenishment there at the component level. All right, you can see here's that individual shirt with the 5 single shirts that goes into our bundle. Now the difference with assemblies, if I were to click over catalog assemblies, these are produced goods. All right, so we're going to walk through a couple examples today. You can see our large office table. We can always click these and kind of see how it drops down. We can see we need table legs to produce office tables. We need 4 of them, and we need a large tabletop to be able to produce that leg. So we're going to look at the large table sales, produce a forecast and a replenishment recommendation, figure out how we need to set some stock aside of the table legs and the tabletops in order to meet the demand of our produced goods. We'll give recommendations to create purchase orders for components. You can receive those purchase orders, and then we'll give you recommendations to produce assemblies out of the component stock. Now you can also have nested bundles or assemblies as well. Now what I mean by that is you can see, for example, our 10-pack cookie down here. It's made up of 10 individual cookies, but we can drill down even further. So that way, as we sell 10-pack cookies and we create a forecast and replenishment recommendation for 10 packs, it tells us how we need to assemble 10 packs out of individual cookies, which then tells us how much flour we need to order. And then of course the bulk flour that we're going to order from our supplier, it will trickle all the way down to tell us essentially how much bulk flour we're going to need to order from that supplier. Now let's talk a little bit about configuration. I'm going to go back to catalog bundles. There's a really key piece here as it relates to bundles, and that's just about how stock is managed. So we talked about how this is all tied together. These are virtual bundles. So if I have 25 packs and I have 100 shirts, I have 100 total shirts no matter what. So if somebody in the store, a customer buys a 5-pack, that stock has to go down to 19. Well, you need something still to adjust the stock of the component down to 95. In that case, it's not going to be handled by Inventory Planner. Something to keep in mind with Inventory Planner, we're never going to adjust your component or bundle stock based on customer orders. So there needs to be some kind of solution there. Now, if you work through an inventory management system that supports this feature, you can find it from our homepage anytime when you click on that integrations tab. If you were to look at any of our inventory management systems, this would give you a sense of if we do or do not support bringing over those bundle assembly relationships. So you can see here, and it'll give you a little bit of information too. Sometimes we can even tell if they're bundles or assemblies already. So you should poke around here, click on your platform. Now, if you are connected through a Shopify store, this isn't something that we would normally be able to pick up, but there are apps such as the Bundles app by Gazebo is one that you can consider, and it would do exactly that. If you sell a 5-pack, it would make sure to adjust the component stock, and then you could actually connect the Bundles app to Inventory Planner for free, and all your work would be done automatically at that point. So you either need an inventory management system or some kind of third-party app to help manage the stock of components and bundles based on the customer orders. So we can always go to the bottom here, convert variant to bundle, and I can grab any item here. So let's say I'm going to search for a test item. I'm going to look at my test product inventory. All right, so that's a good one. We're going to add that in. We've classified this now as a bundle. And so now what we have to do, we have to add some components in. If I click that plus sign over here on the right, that's going to give me an option to either add an existing variant if I already have one here in the system, or if we're pulling one from your store, Or you can create a brand new IP variant. This would be an inventory planner variant. It exists only within our system to create POs and have forecasting relationships. So you'd only create an IP variant if it just doesn't exist anywhere else and you need it specifically for our system. So let's say we're going to go ahead and add an existing variant in this case, and I'm just going to look up another test product here. And let's go ahead and grab this first one. All right. So as we sell our test inventory tracking product here, it's the same thing as selling 5 of these guys. All right. It's the same kind of relationship as you see there with the 5-pack of t-shirts. Now, if we have additional components, we could select that button. We could even select multiple components at the same time. Same idea there, of course, on the assembly side. Now, the main difference with assemblies is that we don't actually have to manage the stock together in the same way that we would with bundles, because the stock by definition is separate. As we order in component stock, we're going to give you the opportunity to create purchase orders to suppliers. You will receive those POs and increase the stock in your store, either through Inventory Planner or your inventory management system. Once we see that the component stock has lifted, we will then look at the assembly, figure out how the assembly is selling and how many assemblies need to be produced to meet the demand. And then upon creating assembly orders, we will give you the opportunity to decrease the stock of components and increase the stock of the assemblies. It's in different pieces, so you don't necessarily need an external solution to be able to set up that type of relationship. And something for Amazon users to keep in mind is that anything at Amazon FBA is considered an assembly by default, because you have to put it together before you can send it to an Amazon warehouse. We have to put together 10-pack cookies from individual cookies before we can send it to Amazon. Or like the 5-pack t-shirts versus the singles, we'd actually have to produce 5 packs of t-shirts from the t-shirts before we even send it to the Amazon warehouse. All right. Now you'll see these details icons as well. If you click into the replenishment section, you'll see those details icons here, or if you don't, make sure you select that gear icon at the top right and add details to your table. If you were to click on that details icon for any item, not only are you going to get a bunch of helpful forecasting and replenishment information, let's click over to the bundles and production tab. And let's say our mango dress, we actually have to order some dye in order to create these dresses. I'm going to first classify this as an assembly. And what if we don't have an existing variant in our system for the dye, it's just some materials. So we're going to create an inventory planner variant, some green dye, call this GD1 is our SKU. We're going to create and add this to the assembly here. We can always come back and adjust the vendor information, the cost price information. Now I need 0.1 grams of dye in order to produce my dresses here. So we're going to factor in that component quantity. And what's really useful about an IP variant, let's see if I come back out of here now and you come to your variants section. If you were to add a filter, we could look at IP variants, or perhaps components that are part of assemblies. Either way, so let's say I'm going to use components of assemblies. There's my green dye. I can see it now. I could click into that details icon. You'll notice you could always hit more, go back to the IP variant and adjust some of those settings. And with IP variants, you can actually initialize that stock at different warehouses as well, because you're tracking it internally. That would ensure that as you're creating new POs for green dye and you receive them, we would increase the stock of that variant. And then as you go to assemble goods, we would decrease the stock of your dye and give you an opportunity upon receiving those orders to increase the stock of your assemblies. You might notice an outfit change or even an environment change, and that's because this is an updated portion to the video based on some very exciting updates that we have implemented related to assemblies. So let's dig right in. Under catalog, under assemblies, just to review, we have assemblies. Here's our assembled goods with their respective bill of materials, the component variants that make them up, and I can expand or collapse as I'd like. I can see my large office table. I'll click here to copy that SKU, paste it in the search bar, press enter. Here's my components. Now what I want to do is go back to replenishment. When we use this drop down to select assemblies, there's a new environment here, and it's improved. It's a little more intuitive. So let's say I want to focus on one assembly for now. You'll notice some different layers to recommendations. What should I assemble next? And then what should I assemble once I can get some new component stock? And we're breaking this down based on an assembly schedule. So very exciting stuff here. The idea is that we are first defining a planning period. We're giving the system an idea. If I have plenty of components available, it's going to take me a day to put them together. And theoretically, once I define a planning period, I want to break down my recommendations into 7-day increments, understanding how long it takes to assemble, of course. So to define the planning period, we're actually looking at the components and saying, of course, we're going to give recommendations on what to assemble now using some existing component stock when possible. But if we need to order new components, how long does it take? We could click into those components. We're back in the variance view. We can see the different components here and get an understanding what kind of stock we have available. Notice we have 4 tabletops. One of them is actually in an Amazon warehouse, so we can't use it to assemble. We have only these 3 that we can work with, so that is actually what is making up when we go back to our assemblies that contain that component. That's actually what's making up our next to assemble. We have 3 that we can use to produce goods now, and the rest we're going to have to wait until we can get that component stock in. Starting then, we'll break our recommendations down into 7-day cycles all the way through December 13th is the way that that's going to be configured. Now, a really useful report that we've developed, you're going to see under Reports, Assembly Schedule. So whether we're looking in the Assemblies view, here's my large office tables. I'm just going to narrow down there just to make it very clear. We're going to assemble 3 in August, 204 in September. I could break this down by week if I'd like and really see in those weekly increments, export this out to a CSV if I'd like. We can assemble 3 right away, and then we start assembling more once we get those new components in. Or if I went over to the variance view instead, and then in here, if I were to look up my component variants that are part of my large office table, I will see the stock, the units allocated for assemblies. I only need 1 tabletop per assembly. I need 4 table legs, so there's always going to be 4 times as high. All right, so that's also an exportable report, so it's super useful here with the updates. Very exciting stuff. All right, so let's head back to catalog. We're going to dig a bit deeper into forecasting and replenishment, but I want to start by switching back to bundles briefly. Now, first, we're going to take a look at our 5-pack of shirts. This is a bundle. It's made up of 5 shirts, but the forecasting and replenishment analysis takes place on individual shirts. What we're doing is essentially taking all the sales of shirts, if they were sold in 5 packs, we're multiplying by 5 and pushing those sales down to the component variance to come up with the forecasting and replenishment analysis for single shirts. So if I see that single shirt over here in my current stock, I click into the details icon. Notice we see 2 lines when we look at the past sales here. We're seeing sales of individual shirts in the form of bundles, so in the form of 5 packs. How many individual shirts did we sell? And then we're also adding on top of that the sales of individual shirts on their own. We're merging all those past sales together to produce the forecast. Seeing the solid line here, the forecasted sales, the dotted line here. Just as usual, we could make adjustments then on the forecast. If we expect we're going to sell more overall here, 2,500 or so, and we're going to be up 10% in Q4. That's going to impact our forecasted sales of single shirts overall during this period that we need to plan for. Once we know, of course, what's expected to sell and when, we take a look at the lead time and the days of stock to produce the recommendation, which lets us know, hey, of these 31 in stock, you're going to run out really, really soon, actually today at the velocity. If we can't get stock until September 14th based on this lead time, we want to cover the needs for the following X days. That's the days of stock. So if I lifted this to 45, all right, we're going to look at the forecasted sales through late October to give a dynamic buffer of stock. Basically, if I'm ordering every 30 days and I order this many to arrive September 14th, well, it would cover my needs for 45 days. It's a 15-day buffer. I would always sort of fluctuate between 15 to 45 days of stock. My order frequency plus a little bit of buffer stock in terms of days is what we're seeing there. So forecasting and replenishment is a little more straightforward for bundles and bundle components. So if I said filters and look at just the bundle components, same kind of idea there. We're taking the sales of bundles, pushing it down to the components. It's going to work a bit differently in terms of assemblies. So let's head back just as a quick review. Catalog, assemblies. Here we can see our assembled goods. These are pre-kitted. They're put together in advance before saying that they're available in stock and for sale. So in order to sell large office tables, we have to put them together using 4 table legs and a tabletop, a large tabletop. So basically, we're going to give recommendations in several layers. In order to create large office tables, we're going to use some existing component stock if possible to produce assembly recommendations. What should you assemble now? What kind of new components do you need to order from your vendor using purchase orders? And then once that component stock arrives, what new assembly should be created based on that new component stock? We use all of that to produce assembly recommendations and present a schedule of those recommendations through the end of your planning period. So just to focus again on that large office table, let's take a look. We can select the details icon. We sell the large office table. We've produced the forecast there. We understand if we want to see some detail about the components, we can click over here to this tab. We see there's table legs, there's tabletops. We have only 4 tabletops, and remember, one of them is in an Amazon warehouse, and we understand that it cannot be used. Only 3 of them can actually be used. They're in my main warehouse. Those are the ones that we can focus on to say, okay, let's assemble 3 off the bat. Today is August 31st. Let's assemble 3 right away. And then, since we are using the stockouts history and we've told the system we don't accept back orders in this case, that comes back to forecast settings here and this particular setting, the use stockouts history. So we can't really do anything, in this meantime when we don't have component stock. And it's just lost sales, unfortunately. So we're going to focus on what happens starting with when we can get the new components in here on September 14th, defined by those component lead times. So once those come in, then we'll produce more. That's what that question mark bubble is saying. Once we get the new components in starting September 14th, and we'll produce 68 each week all the way out until we get to this period. That'll cover our needs through December 13th. That's what we're going to be seeing here at the assembly level. If I switched over, so I want to click into the components, my table legs, my tabletops. And what do we see here? So table legs, let's look at the tabletop. We only have 4. We don't have any coming right now. We're getting an error here. We're going to be selling out really soon. Click into that details icon. Well, we don't sell the tabletop on its own. It's sold in the form of large office tables. We don't see a forecast here because it's not sold on its own. If it did sell on its own, we would see some past sales and a forecast additionally at this level. But since we don't, and regardless of whether we do, we would see the bundles and production tab and the assemblies that this particular component is part of, the recommendation that's being generated at the parent assembly level times the component quantity to say what is the stock allocated for assembly. We need 894 tabletops in order to meet our needs through the end of this planning period that we've set through December 13th. So for table legs, a little bit different story. We have 2020, we have plenty now, but we're still going to be throttled to a degree based on large tabletops. But we can click inside the tabletops, the table legs here. We understand we go to bundles production. Well, we see that large office table, we need 894. There's 4 table legs that go into the table, and that means we need over 3,500 table legs just to meet the requirement that we need for large office tables. And we repeat that analysis with small tables. We need 703, 4 per table, so another 2,800. That addition is what makes up our stock allocated for assemblies that we're going to see. If I ever need to make adjustments at the assembly level, I'll just click back in. All right, so I just click back. So that's the stock allocated for assemblies. I'm going to take that difference. That's what's going to drive the replenishment recommendation at this point. Now, if there were some forecasted sales, if we say we sell table legs separately for those who craft their own tables, well, we would take that additional forecast of those parts being sold on their own and that additional forecasted demand and what's needed for that planning period to cover its own sales, and that would also impact the replenishment. Essentially, we're saying this component stock that we have currently, the 2020, what's going to happen? So we're going to make 3 tables right away, so that's 12 table legs gone. And then we can't really do much until we get more tabletops. Once we do, well, we're going to start allocating some stock here. We get new component stock in. It takes 14 days. And then we're going to slowly decrement from that component stock so we can assemble more large and small office tables. And we would essentially break down our recommendations as we've suggested and I can go back to that report, the assembly schedule. I can look at my variants. I can look specifically at my assembly components and see a schedule. How exactly do I need to use these components to then build my various assemblies? This would let me know. So once we've configured the lead time, the days of stock for components, the assembly time, and the assembly cycle, and we're happy with the recommendations we're seeing, it's time to take action. We can head back to replenishment, we can select the assemblies view, and from here, we can make selections. So I'm just gonna grab the one assembly here, since that's the one that we've been focusing on in this example, but you could select multiple assemblies to create assembly orders. Now notice I'm getting an error. In this case, it's because I don't have enough components in my US warehouse. So I'm gonna select the warehouse where I have stock. That's where the assembly is gonna take place. I'm gonna assemble 3 of these large office tables. If I select the components button here, I'll see the components I'm gonna use to create them. It's only a day to assemble, so here's my assembly time. We can use settings and customize the assembly order just like we can customize purchase orders. Same idea there. And we can create that assembly order. We could email it, we can print it, just as usual. All right, and if you were to then receive an assembly order at any point, say tomorrow we've built the 3 tables at our UK warehouse, and we can select this and save to receive the assembly order. That says, hey, we've received them, closes the order, and then we offer options at this point through an eCommerce integration to increase the stock of assemblies in the store or decrease the stock of the components accordingly. If you're connected through an inventory management system, you wouldn't see either of these buttons. Instead, you would ideally see a prompt that would allow you to save this assembly order to your inventory management system to manage your receiving there. For that, you would just go back to our homepage in the integrations table and check your inventory management system to see if that's a feature that we support. If you see the assemblies orders push function is available, that means as you create those orders in Inventory Planner, you will be able to save that to Sin7, Deer, etc. to be able to manage the receiving there, and those details would sync back automatically. Versus if you're connected through, say, Shopify, you're going to manage those orders with an Inventory Planner, and upon receiving, we will provide the opportunity for you to increase the stock in your store, respectively, based on what you received. That's what we're going to see here in terms of creating assembly orders. Now, if I go back to replenishment and I'm in that variance view and I want to focus specifically on component variants that are part of that large office table, well, we know that we're going to need a lot of table legs and tabletops, right? We have all kinds of tables that we've got to build. We're going to need 63, almost 6,400, and we only have 2,000 left. So, okay, that difference that we need to order, here's our component variants. I can create purchase orders, or I could select the button here if I need to create purchase orders to separate vendors or anything, that I'm going to be able to create multiple purchase orders and set that up. But let's say this is all to the same vendor. Here's my vendor, my Chinese supplier, my cost price, everything's populated, and then we just can create purchase orders from there, as we typically do. Make sure to check our documentation. If you're curious about purchase orders or anything, click that chat bubble in the bottom right and just search purchase orders. You'll see information about creating POs, receiving POs, customizing POs, all kinds of good stuff there. Make sure to check it out. So if we cancel this order, I'm going to show you another method. Under replenishment, if we go back to assemblies, maybe the need really is just to create POs for components, but just based off of in terms of the tables we need, ignoring completely the component stock. So that's what this trick is. Now, if I just look at this one item, I know we need 894 large office tables, and I just want to create a PO to get all that component stock in. We don't really stock, in this case, the components, so we just need to know what to order, and all of it's going to be used for assemblies. So we say, grab that amount, take that drop down here, some extra options, and we can create purchase orders based on the assemblies replenishment. And we see a prompt here. Do we want to create a PO to order large office tables as is? Or do we want to order the components that are needed to produce that? So we replaced it with components, which allows us to take 894, which is the replenishment of our large office tables, just one tabletop per, and multiply it by 4 to order that many table legs. So again, this ignores any existing component stock, but it's a quick way to create purchase orders for components based on your assemblies replenishment. Same idea, you could create the PO from there. And as we discussed with the integrations platform, If the purchase orders syncing function is supported, then you're going to want to send that purchase order to your inventory management system and handle your receiving and everything there. We'll pick up any updates on those orders and the stock changes respectively from that system. And if and when that's not possible, you create POs with an inventory planner, manage your receiving with an inventory planner to at least close out those POs, and then optionally at that point we'll offer you the opportunity to increase the stock of those components in your store respectively based on what you just received. If we cannot sync purchase orders between systems, that's going to be that option there to help save a little bit of time. So to bring things back around, especially for those who have been using our Assemblies function, one really nice benefit with these updates, if we come back to Assemblies, for example, we look at that large office table. Remember how we actually do have some table legs currently. So let's narrow this period down. I don't really need more to cover me than like 10 days. So it significantly lowers that recommendation, and in fact it zeroes out the recommendation for table legs. We don't need them. We have plenty. We've allocated some for assembly. Well, in this case, we're still at least going to recommend, we're still going to be able to forecast to see when those units are expected to sell out. In the past, it kind of went on indefinitely if you didn't have assemblies in place, but now we'll understand that it's likely that it's going to continue on beyond that point. So we'll take the stock allocated for assemblies, essentially, and use that to reduce to actually say when are those components expected to sell out. Our large office tables are going to sell out today, however, because we're selling them too fast, like hotcakes. But now we're going to get accurate sells out in metrics even at the component variant level. Now just a bit of a review overall, what's kind of going on here. Catalog, again, as your library. You can see your bundle or assembly structure with their corresponding components. You can collapse, you can expand to see that detail. In replenishment, you'll be able to toggle between warehouses as usual. You'll want to use a combined warehouse, say for example, maybe you just have some components stock in one warehouse, but it doesn't really fulfill orders there, but your assembly stock is somewhere else. You can always create combined warehouses, aggregating the stock from numerous locations with the sales from a specific location to drive recommendations in terms of assemblies and what to assemble. As you create those assembly orders, we're going to assemble 3 large office tables, etc. from here. Then you'll be able to define where should they actually be assembled, because the combined warehouse is thinking of everything overall. We'll actually select the warehouse where that assembly is going to take place at the time of creating that order. So in terms of a workflow, you're starting typically at the assemblies view. We'll say based on those assemblies, based on your planning period that we're defining here, that large office table, what do we need to satisfy our needs through September 24th? In this case, they're much smaller. It's not a very high period where you need to order in some components, and then we're going to break our schedule down. Or again, we can extend that period out as we need to. 30 days here, 30 days there. And we're going to borrow the lead time and days of stock here at the component level to ultimately drive the behavior of what's going to happen with our assemblies and how we break down that replenishment schedule. We'll be able to use reports, assembly schedule, to be able to see what's either allocated for assemblies or what should be assembled, break it down by month or by week. So you'll be able to export that report anytime that you'd like. And then, of course, for variants, for component variants on bundles or assemblies, you're going to see those component variants here. You'll be able to grab them and start creating purchase orders, trusting that we're considering all the forecasted sales and replenishment recommendations of their corresponding bundles and assemblies. From there, you'll want to save those orders over to your inventory management system to the extent possible. If your system supports purchase order, push, pull functionality, or transfers between warehouses or assembly orders, anytime that's possible, you'll use inventory planner recommendations, and then you can create the stock order, and then we'll give you that option to save it over to that system. Or you could just export recommendations from inventory planner and load it into that system, and we'll pull it from there. Either way, you want to make sure that you check this table, because if we don't support that functionality, you can still create the stock orders, the PO, the assembly order with an inventory planner. You're just going to want to make sure to handle the receiving and the stock management piece there to push that increase of stock back to your warehouse with an inventory planner as those orders are completed. Now, I know it's a lot of information to take in. Make sure you pop open that Help Center and check our article on bundles assemblies. If you have any questions, you'll be able to reference it there. If anything's unclear, if we're not seeing something in that article, send us a note, drop a screenshot, show us what's going on so we can help answer some questions there. And stay tuned, of course, for webinars that are going to be coming up to give you a little bit more information on bundles assemblies. And stay tuned for more exciting updates on the horizon. All right, thanks again, and good luck planning.